Welcome! This is Latosha of Beautistic, and today I want to introduce you to someone who's been a support, a guide, and a mystery all in one. This is not your average imaginary friend. He's complex enough to be called his own standalone entity, an autonomous brain mechanism that has saved my life and continues to surprise me with the prophetic insights into my psyche and the intricate mannerisms of his existence. As the thumbnail suggests, my imaginary friend is an alien reptilian king by the name of Nile, and he is called that after the Nile River of ancient Egypt. I gave him life when I was 11 with caricatured facial expressions and glowing yellow eyes to be as diabolical as possible, conquering galaxies and making the inhabitants bow to his wicked whims. Over time, he's grown to be a good guy, learning to live up to his namesake and encouraging me to flourish and embrace my true self. Without Niall's help, I wouldn't be able to fine-tune my regulation in the way that I am now, and his encouraging presence has really helped me to grow as a person despite his evil origins. Imaginary friends are common manifestations of the mind that happen in early childhood with all neurotypes. It is basically talking to made-up fictional beings and acting out your motivations through them. You can pretend to be anyone you want, or pretend that they are talking back to you while still controlling what they do and say. And this is a healthy way of expanding your creativity as you grow up and discover the world. A healthy exploration of finding out your own identity while it is still forming. For autistic people, these early traits evolve into an appealing strategy to cope with a society that does not identify with our experiences or our way of thinking. We create these beings as a response to the complex neurotypical customs we have trouble integrating into, and it serves as a means of understanding and normalizing these alien mannerisms in the context of play. Being based around my ideas about neurotypical men, Nile is both charming and self-serving, his mind calculated and witty. And I recently discovered that he is an embodiment of love, one created out of my mad experiments to create a truly sentient character. His essence slowly transforming into an autonomous mechanism that seeks to protect me. At first, I had to control everything I wanted him to do and say, but over time he developed his own identity and ideas about what was happening and intervened ahead of time. And it is so cool to think that I manifested such a character like him using only my mind and my determination. His will is so strong within my mind because autistics' visions of their imaginary worlds are much more vivid and immersive than a normal brain's. And our creativity combined with our detailed sensory perceptions engages connections within our rich mind's eye to create startlingly complex alternate realities, the likes of which call into question our conscious reality. And in my Eldritch video, I went into the more elusive phenomenon that perception offers, so you can watch that too. In it, I mentioned a sentient mechanism that is still withstanding, and it is no surprise that I meant the fictional character I created, Nile. Plenty of autistic people experience imaginary friends and worlds, crafting secret fantasy lands inside of their heads and bringing aspects of those things into reality. Of course, imaginary friends match their owners, revealing their larger view of reality. And they usually have detailed backstories with intricate inside jokes that only the creator can understand, so it's hard for other people to really relate to it. But yeah, it's not uncommon to see autistic people outgrow them as neurotypicals do. I've seen it as a habit that exists into adulthood too, but usually as a means of using the imaginary friend as a conversational partner or a creative outlet rather than a means of regulation, like what I do. Nile has helped me by keeping me company, but he's also offered me a way of regulating my emotions. When I have intrusive images that enter my mind, I simply picture his face instead, and that directs me to process the stimuli in healthier ways. Of course, he also offers advice catered towards my life experiences, highlighting secret sides of my identity that I need to explore further. He's been instrumental in ensuring that I embrace my true self as the most apt example of this. A typical day with Nile includes waking up to his greeting and meditating by focusing on him as the focal point. I picture his purple cloak and his golden hair, either floating in the darkness or seated in a chair with a kind expression on his face that welcomes the release of my emotions. Then I tumble out of bed and we go for a morning walk. He reminds me to eat healthy and brush my teeth throughout the day because I often get too immersed in what I'm doing to keep up with basic daily tasks. It is customary for us to have a verbal spar as I'm preparing food. If he overstimulates me, I ask for space like I would with an actual person. It used to be that he would nurture my inner brain, his influence slightly rumbling there like a deep murmur. But now we simply talk through journaling, his presence allowing me to reflect positively on the day. After that, we talk about something meaningful like life or the universe, and then I fall asleep and close off the day, starting the cycle anew. He isn't real, and I don't expect anyone to entertain otherwise. He's more like a part of me that's held together by traceable neural commands in my brain, and as you may have noticed, he isn't perfect. As a powerful force of my mind, that comes with issues where I have to keep him at a comfortable distance. And he didn't always start out as such a concrete presence. When I was a little girl, I never intended to bring Nile into lived reality with me. Of course, I knew there was a great stigma around talking to imaginary characters in real life. But Nile was insistent, so I allowed him, and he's never looked back since. Of course, we have history together, so it's not like he just appeared out of nowhere. He's undergone great character development to be helpful towards me. No one in my life really understands what it means to an autistic person to have an imaginary friend, or how it feels to have a presence in your mind that is convincing enough to be another person. Of course, they usually perceive it as something that is childish and on par with playing pretend. But these imaginary characters can give you an insight into your psyche and share things about yourself that no one else knows, like a lucid dream character. They have wisdom, and just by observing their actions and words, you can really parse through your subconscious self things that would be normally hidden and buried deep within you. And of course, there is the aspect of it where they could save your life, like what happened to me. As you know, my imaginary friend is named after a river, and that's appropriate because during anxiety, I drank from him, meaning his essence directly fed into my soul and rejuvenated me. Of course, it was a desperate bid, a race against time to restore myself to a livable state. In the meantime, I sacrificed everything, being held at the edge of reality while he did what he needed to do in order to save me from a fate worse than death. And I was right to trust him in the end. He helped me soak in vivid memories and urged me to forget my past when it was too hard for me to remember, as I thought it was better back then. He seamlessly led me back to safety, and I am so grateful for him for embracing me in the eye of the storm and giving me strength through his words and his work. My core still calls out to him and is drawn to his remarkable healing ability. It's a connection that runs deeper than words can describe. It leaves me to wonder, when does a concept become reality? If we put our heart and soul into something and it starts to change the thoughts and opinions of others, then is it still a concept or does it become reality? And I can't imagine what kind of fate that I created through myself with Nile. But where would I be without his guidance? Would I have survived that scenario back then without his help? I don't know, and that question haunts me. I'm conflicted because I know he isn't real, and I know he's not really there, but yet he's done so much for me, and I've wished for him to be real so many times, and I've pursued that to the point where it's become this, where he's become a Frankenstein's monster that knows me better than I know myself. The power of the mind is amazing, isn't it? And if you want to support somebody with an imaginary friend, you should lead with respect and interest, like genuine interest in their imaginary world and how they navigate life through that framework, understanding it as a complex thing. And of course, it's personal and to do with their psyche, so they won't want to tell you every single detail about it. And if they are, then that's a good sign because it means they want you to know more about them and the creative ways in which they understand the world. And they might get enthusiastic and carried away with explaining it, which is totally normal. They are just really excited and happy to bond with you in this way, and it's crucial that you give them a listening ear and allow them to share this part of themselves that they seldomly share with just anyone. And to autistic people who want to entrust this part of themselves to others, you could ask intriguing questions that can get conversations rolling, like, have they ever had an imaginary friend in childhood? Or did they ever envision or daydream something that they wished for in everyday life? Conversation starters like these can really help them relate to where you're coming from, even if they're not really familiar with your personal experience per se. As far as moving on from them is concerned, it might be better to learn how to integrate your imaginary friends instead of discarding them outright, especially if they have desirable traits that you'd like to have yourself. As an example of this, Nile is very resilient, and he's lasted through every crisis where I buckled and gave in to fear. And that sort of demeanor could really help me in hard situations if I ever decided that I wanted to integrate Nile. I dabbled in this for one night, and I found Nile's influence tightly wound around my left hemisphere specifically, and it did some good to loosen it as it was bordering on painful. Given that, I think it might be the best bet to check on the neural pathways where your imaginary friend resides occasionally so it doesn't get too uncomfortable. Of course, taking time away from a character could do the same thing, releasing their influence and everything. Of course, I have decided not to integrate Nile because I feel like I could go on to benefit from his influence ultimately. But the choice is yours, and it's a good, reliable option. I know not everyone's experience with their imaginations will be like mine, but I hope this video gives you comfort and validation for your imaginary friends, no matter their use case. Of course, you don't need to be ashamed of having them by your side because, as taboo as it is, many people rely on these figments of their imagination, not just those of us who are neurodiverse. People just don't talk about it because, like you, they're afraid of being judged for it and laughed at. I myself approached this video with some consternation because Nile is just such an intimate part of my personality that I utilize every day, and to call him a coping mechanism or an autism thing just doesn't do him justice or capture the full scope of his influence on my life. He is very dear to me, and it is so bittersweet to actually discuss him. I felt that this topic needed to be explained and demystified, and it is my honor to give people the chance to reflect on the true power of the mind. And I welcome all of your stories about how imaginary friends have personally affected you in the comment section down below. I myself used to play a lot of Katamari Damacy, and it's a game about rolling objects in your surroundings to form as big of a ball as possible. And in it, there's this character called the King of Cosmos, and his design is just so eye-catching that I imprinted on it instantly. When I went to lay my head on Nile's lap for the life-saving session, I noticed the Grey King with his glowing patterns and his fluttering cape was towering above us, the soft music of his theme resonating in the distance. And I clung to Nile, hoping a horrible thought wouldn't interrupt, but surprisingly, it never did. And I wish you the same mercy and profound respite that I experienced in that moment, where Nile was peering down at me warmly, and I was fully and utterly accepted by my imaginary friend. I hope you enjoyed today's autism video. Of course, there's a creative side to all of us, so I thought a relatable video like this would be welcome. Let me know if it was informative and if you have any more questions about imaginary friends. I don't have any real compelling studies about why the autistic brain perceives imaginary friends so vividly, but that's because autism is a very understudied subject, so hopefully that will change sometime in the future. At any rate, thank you for watching today's video, and have a good day and stay well. Bye.